Ladies, gentlemen, and friends beyond the binary, welcome to the Discourse for today, December 15th, 2023. I'm your host, Tristan. Hello, 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 everyone. Just want to say hello. My name is Tristan. I am the host of the YouTube channel Step Back, which you can find at stepbackhistory.com, and the co-host of the podcast It's Probably Not Aliens, which can be found at probsnotaliens.com. I stream on Fridays at noon here on the YouTube, and if you want to support my work, you can do so by signing up for Nebula at nebula.tv/stepback, or by going on patreon.com/stepbackhistory, or if you're in the chat right now, super chats, always welcome, never required. And if you want to check out my latest video that came out earlier this week, is on the Land Back movement, a video that was long overdue, and it took a lot out of me to get that video out, but it is out now. And my next video, which is coming, if you want to be like really, really strict about it, is a kind of end of the year update video that I'm making about what 2024 is going to look like for Step Back, and, you know, Tristan in general. That should be coming out soon, asterisk. I haven't had a whole lot of time to work today. In fact, I've had no time to work today. It's a whole thing where, like, you got the stream in the middle of the day, and then before that I had some issues. Before that, I just had to, like, what's it called? I had some morning plans, and then I have an hour after the stream is over, I then have some weird, like, kind of Christmassy open house thing at my our kids' daycare that I have to go to. So today is a little bit of a write-off, but hopefully Monday maybe I'll get this video out, and I can put that out to everybody. Fun. And then in the new year, I'm making a video about Palestine. So that's the next, project, Step Back video that I am, like, engaged with. Yeah. If you want to submit questions for this or future streams, I put a link in the chat, but I will say right now, you could start. If you put your question in, it's almost guaranteed to be read today, because I currently am sitting on a total of 0 questions. So I can't really do anything in the meanwhile, and I'm just going to have to ad-lib for 2 hours if I don't get anything. Yeah. If this is your first time watching the stream, please make yourself known in the chat. We've got an amazing chat community. These viewers hang out and have a pretty great conversation while I just kind of blabber for a couple hours. So join on in, say hello if this is your first time here. And lastly, but not leastly, we do our wins. So this stream often veers into dark topics and depressing stuff. So usually we start off the day with a discussion, I guess, of wins. So what we do is we post our W's at the beginning of the stream, where we talk about small and big victories of the past recent times. So if you managed to have a good breakfast this morning, or if you, got into your favorite college or anything in between, can talk about your wins. We celebrate each other's wins before we get into the rest of the stuff. As far as wins go for me this past week, let's see. I ran some decent RPG sessions, and last night was described as Saw with emotions, emotional Saw. That was fun. The list of things for me to consider wins are a little hard, because I'm kind of in a tough situation in many, many fronts. But I guess I'm not, having borderline panic attacks about the fact that I'm completely unemployable anymore. That's nice. Or that I don't know what, like, I don't know how we're going to be paying our bills come like, February or so. I'm glad that like, that stuff isn't making me like, border on having panic attacks anymore, because I'm thinking that we're probably going to be okay. So, but yeah, I guess that would be my whim. And I released the land back video that was, to me, I think, a cursed video. Every single step of the process seemed to go wrong one way or another. And so it was like almost 2 weeks overdue. And that was brutal. Every part of that video was brutal. I was really like worried that the video was going to come out and it was going to be a disaster, but people seem to like it. It seems to be doing solidly okay, which I think is the most that I can hope for. And I also am feeling good that I have a win where I think I have a decent release schedule kind of up in the air now for the future. My plan is now to release a video every... Like, one of the things that I'm doing in the new year is that I'm pushing the Step Back video release schedule from the first Friday of every month to basically every 5 weeks. And then I'm going to try to, and that's like the mainline big videos. Hopefully that I can keep that up, but also if I can't, I'm also seriously considering making what I think Scott has called laundry videos. And laundry videos are sort of videos that have less visually interesting stuff going on and might be like scripted or might be working off notes and more fast turnaround things about subjects, and also working on shorts and stuff like that. That's sort of the things that I'm looking into in the new year. And also just the other part, which I talked about with you guys last week, which is finding a real job and getting a real job, because YouTube not paying the bills no more, or at least YouTube hasn't been paying the bills or hasn't been making, I haven't been making positive money on Step Back for a long time. But I have to, like, when with my wife getting laid off a few weeks ago, we're like, now I have to be like very serious about finding a way to convince companies that posting on the internet for 8 years garnered me enough valuable skills to let me do whatever it is I need to do for their company. So, fun stuff. What else? Yeah, I think that's the main things. Let's see. How you feel about the Parti Québécois leading in the voting polls in Quebec? I'm kind of indifferent to it, I'll be honest. I mean, I'll say a couple things as somebody. So there's two things, which is that I kind of have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder from the Parti Québécois because of the time when I lived in Quebec, which was, this was like about a decade ago. I moved out of Quebec in 2013. So when I was living in Quebec, main thing that they were doing that pissed me off was that they jacked up tuitions for out-of-province students. Or no, sorry, that wasn't that. Basically, like after in the result of taking over from the Liberals after the tuition hikes led to the Red Square movement, the Parti Québécois put in, or specifically under Queen Pauline, as we called her, or Pauline Marois, she put in a sort of legal regime that was implementing really sharp budget cuts to the English universities in Quebec. And the university that I went to was the smallest English university in Quebec, and took it pretty tough. We were having some really nasty budget issues. And that, I was in student government at the time, and that pissed me off. But that being said, the Coalition Avenir Québec is also like just as bad, if not worse, because they're like a sort of right-wing nationalist party that has, some fash leanings, and in recent years, like their whole platform has been about like basically making it illegal to be Muslim in public, and trying to like most recently, which is like the thing that I think is causing some of their problems, is that in order to try and basically reduce the amount of people who speak English in Montreal, they're making the out-of-province tuitions in all of the English-speaking universities increase by something like $3,000 a semester. to the point where now if you want to go to like McGill or Concordia and you are from out of province, you have to pay something like $12,000 a year or something like that. Something insane like that. And that is terrible. That is just awful. And so that is like that is an awful thing to do. And I don't really like, and I mean, like the CAQ is full of shitty ideas like that. And so that's why, like, you know, that's probably why the CAQ is probably, you know, running into hard times, because it turns out maybe being blatantly racist is not the best policy position. It actually does work in Quebec surprisingly well, but even so. So I'm like, you know, I'm not necessarily like in love with the PQ, but the CAQ is definitely tangibly worse. I really would love if QS, or Quebec Solidaire, the sort of left-wing party in Quebec, actually had any seats whatsoever. That would be nice. Unfortunately, when you're voting in Quebec politics, your choices are limited. You've basically... you only really can vote for Quebec Solidaire in like a handful of places around Montreal. And then your other options are basically the Parti Québécois, the CAQ, or... so the Parti Québécois is like a vaguely centrist, maybe center-left nationalist party. And then you have the CAQ, Coalition Avenir Québec, which is a right-wing nationalist party, which is the current party in charge of Quebec. And then you have the Liberal Party, which is the sort of center-right / right-wing federalist party that is like, you know, against Quebec nationalism. And none of those are options I love, really. But I guess the PQ are like the least bad. But I have no idea. I don't know what the PQ's been up to in like the decades since I stopped following Quebec politics. Let's see. Your W said you're going bowling with friends tonight. Nice, Abby. Bowling's fun. Kaylee got paid to and can finally buy Christmas presents. That's awesome. I love that feeling. I'm very happy that we did the majority of our Christmas shopping before my wife got laid off, so that we have the presents and we don't have to be like, do we pay mortgage or buy gift? That kind of thing. You came to a conclusion regarding your father. You sent an email and got a response. You can let it rest until January. Good stuff. Oh, sorry. My son decided that I needed to wake up at 5:15 a.m. this morning, so I'm pretty tired. Not gonna lie. I am caffeinated to the fucking gills, and I am on Vyvanse, but my brain is still like, you did not sleep enough last night. You only got like 5 hours of sleep. Or, yeah. And so I'm like, I'm kind of a wreck, but I'm trying. I'm pushing through. Okay. Soliloquy. You made a video for the first time in years. That's a win, even if YouTube's anxiety-inducing widget doesn't think it is. Yeah, the widget is the worst. For those who don't know, if you're a YouTuber, what happens is if you release a YouTube video, it compares your video, like how many views it's gotten since it came out, to your last 9 releases with how many views they had at that same point. And you get a rank out of 10. And it seems to be designed almost exclusively to give YouTubers anxiety. Because, like, you know, my video, I think, is doing decent for my channel, and it's currently 5 of 10, which I'm hoping will change soon, because I've been having, like, a string of videos that feel like they're underperforming, and it's just because I made a handful of videos at the beginning of the year that did absolutely redonkulously well, and it has made the rest of the year feel like I'm doing shitty, because everything since then has just been like nothing compared to them. And I would love to see a video actually get into like the sort of one or two of 10, which I haven't seen in a while. Yeah, Soliloquy. You make animated explainer videos, so people should check that out. Dazia's win is that in an hour after stream, they're going to try their first edible. Waiting for friends to be around. Fun. As somebody who has several edibles, there's actually, I can see right now, I have a bag of edibles on my desk. I am looking at them right now. Shit, what's it called? It's legal. I bought them from a store. But like, here, look. I'm not even lying. Let's see if I can get that. Yeah. This is not a crime. This is a legal purchase for Canadians. But yeah, these are Boom Edibles. Indica, THC infused gummies. Yeah. I haven't eaten any of these in a little while, but maybe I should. I would. I'm gonna have like my first. I'm gonna have like my first evening of free time tonight for the first time in like almost a week, and so I think I might, take an edible and just chill out a bit. All right. Pim got Christmas presents for their mother. Also a W. Good job. Do you know if those tuition increases also apply to grad students? I mean, they should. I mean, not that they should, like, not that I think that it's a good idea. It's just that I don't see any reason why they wouldn't. In Canada, most graduate students do get a TA-ship, and usually, like, in Canada, if you're a graduate student, you usually get some sort of TA-ship, and part of the contract for your TA-ship is that they nullify your tuition as part of it. So, as long as you're in your funding period, you should still not have to pay to go to university if you're going in Quebec for grad school. Okay. Greens recently won a special election in Ontario Parliament, giving them 2 seats. How are the Ontario Greens compared to the federal Greens? I mean, Ontario Green Party, they're like the thing is that they're like very close to irrelevant. Like they only really ever get seats in like special elections, or if somebody crosses the aisle. But I don't know how much like their whole thing. Yeah. So the main thing is that the Green Party in Ontario is very much like the Green Party of Canada, maybe even more so. So this is the thing about the Canadian Green Party that people don't really know outside, is that in the rest of the world, Green parties tend to have a reputation of being very left-wing parties. But in Canada, our Green Party is actually fairly conservative. Actually, that's not even fair to say. The Green Party in Canada is more ideologically incoherent. Like, they tend to not really have any sort of consensus on any issues except for environmentalism. And that, like, that would kind of work for a long time at the federal level because, they had 1 seat and it was the leader of the party, Elizabeth May. And she basically was just the face of the Green Party for a long time. And they would just, reliably get their, 1% of the population. They would get their 1 seat in Vancouver, and that would basically be it. And they wouldn't really do much else. But then Elizabeth May left politics, or she left the Green Party. And they had a leadership race, which showed that the Green Party was having a lot of trouble rallying behind a new leader. And mostly over issues to do with Israel and Palestine and stuff like that. Because, when you want to be a political party in a sort of first past the post big tent party system like the one we have, your party has to have positions on pretty much everything. You can't in a sort of maybe in a a like proportional representation type situation, you might have parties that can be more specialized on just a handful of issues. But the Green Party, beyond environmentalism, and typically with like an environmentalism, like environmental, like green capitalism bent, the Green Party really doesn't have much of a coherent ideology, and so they kind of tore each other apart when they chose a new leader, and that new leader lost her seat. Like, she tried to run for a seat that was in a by-election and lost, and so they had a situation where the leader of the Green Party wasn't in Parliament, and then because she had basically split the party in twain, she had to like resign, and they had to get a new leader. But again, that's all federal. The Ontario Party is like the Ontario Party is actually like fairly right-wing. The Ontario Green Party is led by a lot of people who used to be part of the Progressive Conservative Party, like Doug Ford's party, or people who came from like the PC party at the federal level. And again, there's a lot of incoherence. Like, the Green Party of Ontario has taken stances on things that are both left-wing and right-wing positions, because beyond the sort of, ecology aspect, they really don't have a lot of ideological coherence. Thing with Quebec Solidaire is that other regions than urban Montreal find the party too left-wing and internationalist, even if they're technically sovereigntist like the PQ. Yeah, Quebec Solidaire is not making a lot of inroads. It'd be, yeah. BC Greens went eco-fash last election. Fun. In a proportional representation system, you can have single parties to the extreme. During the last election last month, I could have voted for the party of sports. Oh my god. Let's see. So I take it that the GOP is largely eco-centrist. Are they as conspiratorial as Elizabeth May? Honestly, I don't know, because I don't really follow the Green Party, because the Green Party of Ontario is largely irrelevant. They have 2 seats in Parliament. They don't get any real say. Basically, in Ontario, if you're not part of the governing party or the opposition, you don't really get much attention. And right now, the Progressive Conservatives are the party in charge, and the NDP are the opposition. So that's like really the only parties that make the news to me. I did do a Green Party. I did scrutineering for the Green Party during one election when I was in high school, because Ontario has a rule where if you want to finish your high school diploma, you have to do like a bunch of hours of community service, and that was a way for me to get some of my community service out of the way. Yeah. Thoughts on Sarah Jama? Based. Based. So, okay. Maybe I should explain the Sarah Jama thing, because my audience is very American, or actually during this stream, a lot of Europeans. So Sarah Jama is a MPP, which is our sort of provincial minister, like a kind of MP, but at the province level. Minister of Provincial Parliament. That's like what it stands for. But she is an MPP for Hamilton, for at least one of the ridings in Hamilton, and she was part of the NDP. So what happened is after the last election, the leader of the NDP, whose name was Andrea Horwath, she stepped down and got replaced with a person named Merritt Stiles. And what happened? So Merritt Stiles became the leader of the NDP, and people really don't know what she was going to do. But then there had to be like a by-election to see who was going to replace Andrea Horwath in her seat. And Andrea Horwath then went on to become the mayor of Hamilton. So that kind of stuff. But Sarah Jama was like so when she was running in a special election, everyone tried to take her down to see if they could take away a seat from the NDP. The Conservatives tried to attack her for basically being anti-Semitic because she is married to a Palestinian man, and also is like has been an outspoken supporter of, like, you know, maybe not killing all of the Palestinians, and maybe not, you know, like opposing killing Palestinians. And this was like a year ago when this all happened. So, but she did get elected anyway, and the NDP touted her because she's like, not only is she like a really like progressive person who won in this riding, but she's also like she's like a disabled black woman who like made like a lot of people like really excited that like she was going to be like part of like Merritt Stiles' inner circle, and it was like, oh, okay, the party is going to like, you know, open up a bit. But then all the shit started happening in October, and she was just far too much of a outspoken person for a ceasefire in Gaza, and so the NDP kicked her out of the party because she was supporting Palestine too hard, because she called for a ceasefire, something that the NDP would then do like 2 weeks later. So they kicked her out, and now she's independent, and it shows like, yeah, Merritt Stiles. And also at the same time, when she was supporting, like, you know, a ceasefire and in support of Palestine back in October, the Conservatives like used everything they could to try and make a media narrative to basically like attack Sarah Jama, to really like you know, to try and make it a thing. And the NDP basically handed Doug Ford an unforced victory. Because they refused to stand behind her and you know stand for what's right, and instead threw her under the bus, and she's now independent. So there's that, because she was told to shut up by the party, essentially, which, yeah. Let's see. Cinnamon Knight. Thank you for the $10 super chat. Much appreciated. Do I believe more moderate and centrist-leaning people are damaging towards progress? I mean, that is very contextual. I think that that centrist-leaning people can be useful, opportunistic allies in the right kinds of fights. Specifically, if you're fighting, you know, for social justice stuff, the kind of stuff that is... See, the thing about centrism is that it's essentially the politics of being a coward. You're afraid of having anybody have any issue with any position you have, and you're kind of obsessed with trying to show everybody that you're smarter than everyone else. So you take this position that's basically based around calling everybody else wrong and then seeing yourself as above the plebeians, because you realize that we can't change anything. Everything has to stay the same, and doing that forever is good, actually. And you end up being like an extremely smug asshole, basically. That is like it's the politics of feeling like you are intellectually superior to other people. Anyways, but the thing is that because they have no class analysis, and they kind of see politics as a bunch of things happening, and because they're centrists and they don't really want to have any brave stances on any issue whatsoever, they kind of just see all of these symptoms, and they never, ever consider, well, why do these things happen? Why is poverty? Why is racism? Those questions don't exist. They just exist. And sometimes they think they're bad. And so on those issues, sometimes centrists can be useful allies, because by being so inoffensive and useless, they do have more mainstream support from people who don't really pay attention to politics and don't really want to do anything that makes them appear like they have too strong an opinion, because we have a culture that kind of makes people think that having a strong opinion on anything is bad for some reason. So centrists can be useful when you're, like, you know, trying to counter racism. The problem though is that people in politics, people who do political activism, seem to think that when you are allies on one issue, that you must be allies on all issues all the time. And the problem is that when it comes to any of, like, the deeper things that would actually, like, fundamentally change society for the better in a more permanent way, instead of just sort of putting band-aids on the gaping wounds of society, centrists will turn against you immediately. And in North American politics specifically, where our politics is so skewed to the right, that liberals or centrists often seem to think that they are the most left-wing position that can exist. And when they are called out by the left, they do not understand, because to be a centrist is to basically not have a strong comprehension of how politics works. So they see everybody who opposes them as like the right. And they don't understand that there is like that they are themselves, in like the international scale, an extremely right-wing person. So centrists. So when it comes to anything that like would actually move the needle on politics, like the more important, deeper issues, they will emotionally become even more vitriolic to the left than to the right, because they're closer ideologically to the right, and second, because they see it as a threat to their identity, where they have billed themselves as like the most empathetic, most compassionate, most left-wing, most like, you know, as far as you can be in being a progressive. That is like their identity. And when it shows like, no, you're actually like very conservative and your positions do hurt people, that threatens their worldview, but not enough that they need, because it would threaten them to the point where they might have to take a stand on something. And taking a stand on something is exactly what they don't want to do, because they don't like a situation where they might have to confront other people. So instead, they will lash out at the left, sometimes just calling them right-wing radicals, or sometimes if they feel like their need for intellectual superiority to others comes through, they'll be like, these are just naive dum-dums who don't understand that things are complicated, and that's why poor people need to die, or that's why Palestinians need to die. And so like that is sort of the main thrust of what happens there. And yeah, so in some very select situations, they can be useful. If you oppose the things that they oppose, you might be able to find some common ground, as long as you don't oppose it too hard. You know, saying that Nazis are bad, you guys can both agree on that. Saying that Nazis need to be punched, that might be too much for them. That might make them uncomfortable, because that might involve confrontation, and confrontation makes them uncomfortable. Then, but you know, but there are some contexts where they are useful. All right. All right. Let's see. Is it kind of bad that I recognize most of those places from my Wikipedia divings into Go Transit? Well, there is that. Huh. I never know you did live streams. Watch plenty of your videos. I don't always agree with you, but I have enjoyed how well thought out your videos and the points you make. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That makes my entire response a little tougher to swallow, but Hilka. All right, how much longer do you think the People's Party will exist? Because I know this time around there's popularity drop because a lot of the voters went back to the CPC because they got a right-wing loon in charge now. I guess so. I have never really, like, the People's Party, like, to say do you think how long do you think it will exist? I don't know. Because like the thing is, there are a lot of bad political parties that have almost no supporters that have been around forever, and they still continue to exist. America has like so many parties that are very irrelevant and have like no chance of ever winning any elections, but they've been around for decades nonetheless. Like the Green Party, like the freaking Libertarian Party. So I can imagine the People's Party will be around for a long time and turn into a weird sequestered thing that no one takes seriously, like they do now. Got kicked out of an institution for a stance that the institution later took is something I'm oh so familiar with, yeah. Centrism is also people who can't care enough to really learn about issues but really want to be apolitical. There is that, yeah. Oh, yes, thank you for the $3 super chat, Dazia. Why are provincial and federal politics, our election results so different? You're talking about in Canada? I would say that if you're talking about Canada specifically, that has to deal with a couple things. One, Canada's federalism is different than the U.S.'s. Canada, the U.S. is a federated republic. Canada is a confederacy, which means that Canada has a much more devolved political system than the U.S. does. What does that mean? That means that Canada has, our provinces are a lot more autonomous than the U.S. is. So, like, there's a bunch of stuff in Canada or in the U.S. that are managed by the federal government that in Canada are provincial things. Like, for example, our healthcare system. We have a constitutional mandate that all provinces provide free healthcare, but the provinces are all individually manage their healthcare systems. So, for example, in my wallet, I have my health card, my card that I present at the doctor's office for so I can get my free, universal healthcare stuff. My health card is an Ontario health card. It's not a Canadian health card. And what healthcare looks like here versus like in BC are different things because the provinces work differently like that. So that's one reason why Canadian provincial and federal elections can be different, is that first of all, so all of the provinces are much more autonomous and much more powerful in their own right, which means that their political parties can be different. The other thing too is that even though provincial politics, like, one of the things about Canadian politics that also can be confusing is that all parties, like in America, you've got the Democrats and Republicans, and they existed like basically at every level of government. In Canada, the connective tissue, like in Ontario, we have the NDP, the federal, and they're a federal party. We also have the Ontario NDP. And the Ontario NDP is a different political party technically than the federal NDP. They collaborate on stuff. They definitely are ideologically friends. And there's a lot of like crossover. But at the end of the day, they are two different political parties that run on different levels of government. Like, for example, I am in the riding association for the federal NDP in my riding, but I am not in the riding association for the Ontario NDP in my riding, which is a very weird kind of confluence of things. There are a lot of people who are members of both, but not necessarily all of them. So there's sort of that has led to like some weird historical stuff. Like, for example, in British Columbia, their Conservative Party doesn't exist. Like, the British Columbian Conservative Party has fizzled out. What that means, though, that is that the British Columbian Liberal Party has absorbed all of that right-wing vote. And so in British Columbia, the elections always come down to the Liberals or the NDP. But in like the sort of context of BC, the Liberals are a conservative party, and the NDP are basically like a sort of center to center left party. In Alberta, they have the Alberta NDP, which is its own political party, and oftentimes has a much weaker stance on climate change and reducing our dependence on fossil fuels than the rest of the country. And like Ontario is currently governed by the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario. The Progressive Conservative Party of Canada hasn't existed in 20 years. The Progressive Conservative Party in Canada was dissolved, and it merged with another federal party called the Canadian Alliance to become the Conservative Party of Canada that we have today. So we're led by a party that there was a federal party that was similar to the Progressive Conservatives that was called the Progressive Conservative Party of Canada, but doesn't exist anymore. So there's that sense. The third thing is that Canada also is Canadian politics is very regional, like very regional. For example, the Conservatives in the last few elections have actually gotten more votes than the Liberals, but the Liberals have been managing to eke out a majority government regardless. The reason for that is that the Conservative vote is so concentrated in the West that they run up the numbers because they'll win a bunch of ridings in like Alberta by like 30 points or something like that, but they'll only get so many seats, while the Liberals tend to do well sort of by small victories in a lot of places. And there are some parts of the country that are very hostile to the Liberals, and so their Liberal parties basically don't have a role. And so you have a lot of provinces, because at the provincial level, a lot of Liberal parties haven't done very well. And so, for example, Alberta's Liberal Party is virtually non-existent. And so their left-wing, right-wing politics are their Conservatives, and theirs is the United Conservative Party and the NDP. And, in Ontario, the Liberal Party fucked the football so hard by basically being openly corrupt for, 13 years running Ontario that they collapsed, and they had almost no seats. And then they ran in the last election the least interesting human being to be the leader of the party that they possibly could imagine. And they did better than they did the election before, but they still did pretty poorly. And the Liberal Party is going to have to do a whole lot of work to sort of come back from the dead in some ways. So there's that. But it does result in the fact that every province in Canada has its own politics going on, and they have some similar political parties, but they also have some different political parties, and the two don't necessarily coordinate or exist in the same plane with each other. And it makes for example, Ontario, which in the last federal election voted very heavily for the Liberals, being a party that at the provincial level has virtually no Liberal party. They have something like 11 seats or something in the whole province, in the sort of in Queen's Park. So that, yeah. So that's the whole thing. Okay. I find them generally slimy, less so than the right, but slimy nonetheless. I find people who get very into liberal politics, especially people who get involved with liberal parties and stuff like that, and become politicians, they basically just do not have ideology. They are in politics for pure ambition, for advancing their own career. If your interests in making the world a better place and their interests in advancing their own career align, you can sometimes use that to your advantage. But if they don't, then they won't. Let's see. Message show up in more context. NDP will do well in provincial and then come to federal and barely send any NDP MPs. And yeah, hopefully I explained that. Okay. Experience. I find myself explaining how progressives are thinking too. Interesting. I have to go to my junk job. Thank you for this $10 super chat. Might not always agree with you, but you are awesome. Have some very well built up recent views. Keep on doing your good work thing, dude. Thank you. Appreciate it. Do real libertarians are a thing? I mean, anarcho-capitalists. Every time I confront a capitalist libertarian, they always turn out to be an ex-Nazi, but still a conservative. I mean, I think there are real libertarians. There are some libertarianism has always kind of been a catch-all for right-wing weirdos in the U.S. specifically. And in the U.S., right-wing weirdos become it really depends upon because there are some libertarians who just want to drink raw milk, smoke weed, but also want no taxes. They're weird, but they're not they're not Nazis. But you can kind of see this where they're if you look on Twitter, there are some libertarian parties of different states that since Trump entered the scene have either gone full fash or become you have become kind of they're gun hippies basically. It really depends upon the state and context. Unfortunately, the reason is because libertarianism is just not a coherent ideology for the most part. Like many small third parties end up becoming just these sort of like cesspools of places where of people who did not fit in one of the two major political parties because, you know, they had some disagreement over something, or they're just kind of a little bit weird, and so they glom onto these political parties. But then like these political parties have an issue like agreeing on even like major things because that's sort of what, there's no stakes. So like, yeah. How'd you think we'd react to that? I don't know. I was more thinking that I didn't really like. I don't know. Centrism is tough to explain. Do real? Let's see. Libertarians are just conservatives who don't want to see themselves as the villain. There is that. There's a Marxist-Leninist party in BC. It gets about 7% of the vote. That's pretty cool. Let's see. Just made a question. Sorry, I forgot to do it before stream. No worries. I recall reading a few months ago that in the Netherlands we had this idea that parties are now post-ideology. What does that even mean? What is the point of a political party if there's no ideology? I guess there's this idea under liberalism that they don't have an ideology and that ideologies are for, like, you know, ideologues, and that really what they are doing is just managing the country. Like, they're just the most competent at doing the job of country running. But at the end of the day, they still have a set of beliefs and ideologies because that are baked into their assumptions about how they would do those things. And typically, if the people who say those kinds of things, it's, you know, it's neoliberalism. And their ideas are just so mainstreamed that they don't see it as ideology because they just see it as the way things are. All right, I do have a couple questions, so I can kind of dig into those, I think. All right. I'm currently preparing a one-shot tabletop role-playing game for Christmas with my mother. I have to tweak the rules a bit because it's a one-person party. Have you ever played a game like this? If yes, what was your experience? Yes. When I was running D&D for my wife, when I was trying to learn how to run D&D for the first time, we did play some like one-on-one sessions so I could kind of get the ropes a little bit. So I did do that, and it is doable. What I would say is that you have to make sure that the system, like there are good and bad systems for that. If you want to play something that's like your Dungeons and Dragons, you're gonna have to do a lot of work to make sure that the encounters are balanced, because one player is much more fragile than like a sort of, you know, 4-player balanced party. So you have to make sure that like you have to. The main things that I would put forward is that you have to prepare a lot more than you would for a regular party, because one player means that they will definitely move through the story a lot faster. Two, if it is a game that has crunchy combat, you're gonna have to make sure that you dial back the difficulty a lot, because RPG combat, it has very much like sort of you know, being greater than the sum of your parts type stuff, which means that for monsters and stuff, like you have to like, it could be like if your character goes down, that's it, you're over, it's done, you don't have anyone to pick you back up, and that can be a real big thing. So I would recommend not playing those systems if you can avoid it, and play something that's a little bit less crunchy in that regard, just for that reason. If you are looking for a system to play, there is a really good RPG that I would recommend for playing either with one other person or solo, and that is Ironsworn. Ironsworn is a role-playing game that has... There's Ironsworn, and then they have another one called Starforged, which is the science fiction version of it. And Ironsworn is designed so that the creator of it, when I talked to him briefly, pointed out to me that Ironsworn is at its core designed to be played with 2 people and no game master. And it has a whole bunch of tools for like figuring out what happens next and balancing around that kind of stuff that does not require, like, you know, tweaking the rules of the system to make it work properly. If you're running a one-on-one game, you might want to do something like that, because even then you can play along. Iron Sworn I like a lot. It's a very fun system. And yeah, that's like that's the main thing for me. Especially because if your mama has never played a role-playing game before, starting with a crunchier system would maybe be a little bit more complicated. Okay. We were talking about college degrees last week. When I was a kid, my grandfather told my brother he should get a degree in something like optometry, like a medical thing that's easier than a full MD. I mean, sure. I feel like very few people have gone... I feel like very few people have had trouble making their rent with a job they got with their optometry degree or whatever, you know? It's a very, as far as like, you know, safe bets on education choices go, things like optometry or like, you know, dentistry and stuff like that are not necessarily bad choices. There's like never going to be a time where society does not need dentists or optometrists. And they still pay decently. And they're also not very interesting jobs, so not a lot of people go into them. So they can, so you can, yeah. Using Basic Fantasy, which is simplified D&D. Oh, yeah, yeah. Basic Fantasy is like a sort of OSR game, if I remember correctly. It's kind of based on like original D&D or something like that. If I remember correctly. It's been a minute since I played it. Well, I've never played it, but since I read about it. I haven't really played many of those like kind of old school Renaissance games, so I don't really know. I can't really speak too much about those. I remember they have a reputation for being pretty deadly, though. All right. What kind of RPG system, D20, percentile, dice pool, etc., give you the right feel and why? All right, we're in deep RPG talk, it seems. Okay. So what I have to say about RPG systems, about dice. Oh, boy. Boy, do I want to talk about dice math and then also like completely alienate the like 44 people who are listening right now. So yeah, there are different types of tabletop role-playing game dice mechanics that are all interesting in their own way and result in different kinds of outcomes. For example, the most common one is the sort of D20 roll, the D&D system, right? You roll a 20-sided dice where there are 20 outcomes with a 5% chance of rolling. You add a modifier, so that kind of gets scaled up a bit. Works decently, especially in combat scenarios, because what happens is that the D20 is very swingy. You know, 5% chance of 20 different outcomes means that when you roll that dice, a whole lot of things can happen really randomly, and that can be wild. So that is interesting. That is a way to, that is a fun, like, I think it works for combats very well. But if your game is not about combat, anytime you're not fighting in those kinds of games, it tends to make things seem really weird and surprising in ways that might not be up your alley if you're into different types of games. Like, if you want a game where sometimes the wizard can lift a heavy object or the barbarian can, can very reliably remember the obscure fact, then that's fine. You can always roll the natural 20. It can always work out if that's a thing you're into. Which I think, like I said, works better in action scenes, but it can also be really annoying in other ways. Then there are other options, like the other big one I would probably mention is like something that's more bell curved, like the Powered by the Apocalypse system uses 2d6 rolls with a modifier, which then if you get a 6 or below, you fail, and if you get a 7 to 9, you mixed succeed, and if you get a 10 plus, you full succeed. I like that one a lot because I like mixed successes. I think that they're a useful thing that moves the story forward in an interesting way. So I'm not against that at all. And I like that one actually quite a bit. But it does mean that, but in combat, it does mean that like you're almost guaranteed to have very Pyrrhic victories, because it's just, it leads to characters being more reliable and more reliably good at the things that they are reliably good at, which, you know, depending upon how your game wants to work, if you want that to be more of a thing, then that's great. Dice pool is interesting because that is like where the amount of dice you roll is the sort of thing you're going for, and that can be done in multiple different ways. Like some are like, you know, rolling successes and amounts of successes, like with Fudge, or like Blades in the Dark, where you roll a bunch of d6s and you take the highest number, so that the more dice you get, the better. That lets you be a lot more dynamic in the odds and lets you have like really easily factor in lots of different, you know, things to figure out what the odds are on a roll, which I like a lot. But it can be the math can be kind of wobbly and tough to figure out sometimes. And then percentile is like what a Call of Cthulhu, I think, uses. And I haven't played Call of Cthulhu, but from what I've been told about people who like that kind of stuff, is that percentile, which is where you roll a D100 and gives you, you know exactly what your chances are for everything. You don't have to sort of intuit the math out. I don't necessarily love that. I think that part of like the sort of math being a little bit arcane so that you don't know exactly what your odds are, there's something nice to that, because it makes, cause the more that you can, like, you know, separate yourself from the numbers and get yourself into the moment instead, I think is better. But I can see some things like, because another kind of like with dice pools, if you is that with percentile dice, you can also take lots of different sort of factors and add them together and still get a very easy number, and then like, here's the number, roll it, etc. So that's like the main thing. I think that in my mind, I kind of talked about this last night as I was running a game. I am of two minds. I think there are two different types of role-playing games that people play. One is the sort of crunchy, action-heavy, combat-focused game, where, like, you know, that's your Dungeons and Dragons, that's your Pathfinders, that kind of thing. And of those systems, I like Pathfinders the most because it's just better designed. But that is, in those games, I think the D20 works just fine. And then there's the more like loose story-focused stuff. And I think that something with more of a bell curve works better for me on that front. But I think that different systems make different feelings, and I don't think that I think that they work for different contexts, I guess is the answer. But my general rule of thumb is that I really like, when it comes to the tactical combat game, I like Pathfinder a lot. When it comes to like the sort of story loose game, I kind of thought that I was going to like Fate a lot, but Fate seems to really bounce off a lot of regular people when you bring it up with them. So I'm trying to find a different sort of generic role-playing game that doesn't, that I can, like, you know, teach people fairly easily and kind of gets that sort of story focus. And the only thing that I'm kind of going with right now is that if I want to run a more rules light story-ish game, I would just take something from sort of the Powered by the Apocalypse umbrella of games and choose the one that is best suited to the sort of genre of story that we're telling and go with that. So that would mean, like, you know, Dungeon World, Blades in the Dark, Monster of the Week, those kinds of games. But admittedly, I haven't played two of, like, the biggest role-playing games in the entire genre. And I don't think I'm going to anytime soon because I typically run games, not play them. and that would be I've never played Call of Cthulhu and I've never played World of Darkness, so I can't really speak to how good those are, you know. But we'll see. The only thing about Powered by the Apocalypse that makes me a little bit a little bit turned off is that I don't know of a good superhero game. So people would say Masks, but Masks is very much like a superhero game with a very specific genre. Like, it's like Masks is for like teenager superheroes. And there is another one called Worlds in Peril, but there isn't like a very specific superhero Powered by the Apocalypse game that could be used to play like any sort of superhero story that is popular. I guess Worlds in Peril would be the best one, but I feel like anybody who would want to play a superhero game would probably end up doing Masks, in which case you're kind of pigeonholed into your like Teen Titans type story. Okay. Let's see what we got next. Aside from your other issues with the genera, do you think it's obnoxious? The genre. Do you find it's obnoxious when alternate history writers deliberately make up weird terms for common things to signify it's in a parallel universe? Never ran into that problem, but it could be annoying. I was just reading a Harry Turtledove short story where you use the term motor wagon or air wagon and calc to figure out from context he meant car, plane, computer, and each time it took me out of the story somewhat. I ended up thinking, this timeline deviated from ours in the Middle Ages so realistically the language would be unrecognizable by today, so you might just write it in regular English like you would a book set on an alien planet or an ancient Rome or whatever. That's not a bad idea behind it too. Yeah, linguistic evolution would, like, doing it just enough to make it interesting, but having it so that it makes your text, I mean, that is true in all sort of world building endeavors, is like basing like you have to like make sure that your the new words that you're adding to the lexicon are not making it harder to understand the thing that you are reading. So I can get behind that. But again, I think that is like a kind of tired thing I've said a lot of times, but it kind of is just another part of the issue with a lot of alternate history writers, which is just that they don't really care about telling a good and accessible story. What they want to do is write a like setting book, like they want to write a wiki for their setting, but they seem like they're kind of forced unwillingly to have to make a story, and don't particularly care if like the story is good or if people actually understand what's going on or want to read it or if it's accessible, because they mainly just want to focus on building their little alternate history world. If you can find it, Mayfair Games DC Heroes 3rd Edition is really good. Interesting. Thing is that game designs come so far in recent years that, but this seems like the superhero game isn't really like getting a lot of attention. So I don't think they're, and so like I know there's that new Marvel game, but I don't really know too much about it, and it seems like it was I don't know too much about it, how it turned out, like the sort of D616 system. I don't really know, but I would like I'd have to think about like how dice would work to make a superhero game for an RPG, because the main thing about RPGs or about making a superhero RPG is that everyone's going to want to have unique powers, that you can give them as much freedom to sort of think of what they want to make as they want. But then you also have to constrain them to make it a balanced game. But that would be a problem because, like, you know, you have different levels of superhero. And balancing that is basically, like, is tough. Like, how do you have a game where you can make both Superman and Batman and not have Superman just be why bother playing anyone but Superman, because Superman can just take care of everything. And also have things like character growth that is based around a power set that, you know, fairly often doesn't really expand or change in a big way, comic to comic, right? So it'd be interesting to figure out how to get that sort of balance right, I guess it would be to say. And also, superhero comics tend to have lots of fighting in them, and so you have to have a game that has a decently crunchy combat, because a superhero game where the fight scenes don't work, or are kind of like abstracted, feels a little bit weak. And furthermore, you'd have to change up action economy, because like a lot of role-playing games are designed around the idea of action economy, because they're all sort of trace their lineage to D&D. And the thing about D&D is that like D&D has this main issue in its combat, which is that the amount of people fighting is really important, and that a combat can be made much more difficult or much easier if you have just more people than the other side. And a superhero game, you would have to find a combat system that can manage a fight where you're taking on, like, you know, 25 mooks at one time, and one where you're like going toe to toe the supervillain destroying the city, and have those both work and be interesting. I remember I was thinking about making one at one point, and one of the ideas I had is that if you were like a Superman type character, like one of the things that you could do in the game is that you could go into debt, like experience debt, when you made your character. So if you wanted to be Superman and get like this huge powerful power set, you could, and at the beginning of the game you would be the most powerful person, but basically you would just not level up for a long time. While like somebody who is like, you know, sort of a Batman character would have a lower power set, but would be able to would not be in sort of experience debt, and could level up faster and, like, you know, advance and customize their character in more interesting ways. And that was sort of the, like, so you're trading power at the beginning for rigidness in the next little while. But these have only been tests. I've never actually, like, you know, developed or play tested any of my game design ideas, because I was too busy, you know, making fucking YouTube videos. So that's a different question. I imagine you could make it work somehow. But also, yeah, like, it'd be like, how would you make a combat where, like, you know, destroying a city and, like, you know, having that sort of big punch out where, like, you know, you're flying and smashing into each other and taking out entire walls feel as fun in the same sort of combat system as, like, you know, you beating up a bunch of, like, low-level thugs. And I don't know how you would do that. It's a difficult design problem, probably for somebody smarter than me. Oh. Would not recommend Mage as my first. If I were to play World of Darkness, I'd probably just go for the classic. I feel like I would probably just play Vampire. Though I don't know exactly, like, I've never even seen an actual play of Vampire, so I don't even know like how it plays. Like, I know it's got a lot of, like, vampire politics, and, like, there's a lot of, like, personal brooding and drama stuff, but I don't exactly know how that plays out mechanically. And Call of Cthulhu, as far as I know about Call of Cthulhu, is it's a game where your character doesn't really get powerful, because the whole idea of Call of Cthulhu is that your character basically starts off at their strongest point and then degrades, because the deeper they get into the sort of Lovecraftian mystery, the more that they sort of, like, go insane and they kind of, like, you know, fall apart and everything like that. But I also have never played it, so I can't speak too deeply about those things. Sorry, that was a lot of TTRPG talk, and also specifically talking about the math that makes the game run, which is very interesting to me, because it's like my, like, main non-step back thing is, like, tabletop games and tabletop game design and stuff like that, because I keep trying to make my own board games and RPGs when I have the actual time to develop them. But I know that that's not what Step Back is for, and so. I have the main thing that I would be excited about is I have a board game that I want to work on, and I have this idea, and I want to make a prototype so bad, but I just haven't had the time to work on it. Skills increase with use, you're kind of growing and withering at the same time. Yeah, that feels Cthulhu-y. The only thing about Call of Cthulhu that I feel like I would have a hard time is that, if I remember correctly, it's more of a mystery game. And so if there's one thing I'm not like the best at developing in my own games, it's mysteries. Like, I don't know if I said this in the session yet, but the session I ran last night was described as what if Saw, but for emotions. Because the whole idea is that they were trying to get to this like powerful artifact that was designed so that two powerful people who were in love with each other could get away from the world and like, you know, have sort of private moments together. But to get past the sort of trials that they set up to get access to this item, were basically based around trying to prove that they were tightly bonded to each other and that they had like a deep connection. So like they had to like, and also so that only those two people could do it. So the party had to kind of get around that. And in the first trial, they had to recognize those two powerful people in a sort of memory recreation of the first time they met, which was at a masquerade ball. So they had to find two people in a masquerade ball. And then the second trial, they had to face the thing that they wanted the most but were forbidden to have, and overcome that with their connection to each other. Third trial, they were all paired up. And when they were paired up, they had to confess the thing they were most ashamed of in their life to the other, and they had to forgive the other person for what they did. And then the fourth one, they had to give up a cherished memory to like sort of like a pensieve type thing. And then after that happened, the memories all got swapped and given to a different person. And then, yeah, lastly, they had to see a vision of themselves at their lowest point and forgive them for what they did. And then they got the thing. It was a pretty tough session, but yeah. Saw. That's basically it. It was Saw, but for emotions. But it was fun. It's a group that really vibed with that kind of play. Not to pull any like, you know, like gender stereotypes or anything like that, but it's a fun group because it is a group that I am running that is all women. And so there is a sort of like, even though like I'm really like not trying to lean into any stereotypes, I don't make choices based on this, but a D&D game with all women that like leads to like this very interesting, there's like this like kind of like this is sort of different energy that kind of comes out of the game, and the kinds of things that they're interested in is very different than your sort of typical game. And so I found myself trying to lean into that so that they can get more of like that design, like that kind of stuff that they like. And it has resulted in a very interesting, different sort of experience than like what I typically see in my like games that have more of a sort of a mixed audience, which I've had a lot of fun with. And I don't think it's too essentialist to say that. Like thing is that, you know, you grow up in an assigned gender, and when you do that, you get exposed to different things, and so you develop interests and tastes that are different. It's not a universal thing. There's obviously a lot of room for overlap and exceptions, but it does mean that, like, you know, your role in society will inspire, or will inform the way you think about things differently, and the kind of things you want to see in a story differently. And when that clicks, it's kind of interesting. That makes sense, right? Women don't have that gross menness about them. Yeah, exactly. And it's very fun to have a group that is all women, because I can approach like the kinds of things that we do is very different, and the kind of stuff that they like one of the things that we had happen in our first session is that they had to deal with, they were dealing, like, the idea behind this first session was that this sort of elk spirit, because it takes place in the Feywild, this elk spirit captured a child. And they, like, learned through, like, kind of going through it, that this elk spirit had lost its, like, mate, and was sort of mourning and was lonely, and wanted, and took the child to, like, be its, like, companion. But obviously, like, the kid needs to go home. But when they found them, they found that the kid was, like, completely fine. And just, like, the elk was just lonely and wanted to be with somebody, just have somebody there with them. But they managed to determine that this elk spirit was, like, actually an important, like, fey creature. Because basically, this creature was, like... This creature was, like, a spirit of music that was the inspirational core of all lullabies. And the bard, they defeated the boss by improvising a song that was, like, the amalgamation of all the lullabies combined into, like, one song. And when they did so, they were able to put its spirit to rest. And that was, like, that is not an adventure that I would run for a different group of people, and the outcome was very different than, like, you know, if I had run for, like, a more, like, kind of, like, typical, you know, mixed gender D&D group. I think not necessarily. I'm talking in generalizations, but I think there's a little bit of that there. Have I had enough time to keep playing Baldur's Gate? Yes. Last week I played Baldur's Gate for, like, about an hour or two. I had just gotten into Act 2, and I did a bit of, like, the early Act 2 stuff. I basically got to the end of there's, like, a big fight in Last Light, the sort of bar in Act 2, where you fight, like, the sort of angel guy and a bunch of, like, flying monkeys or something. I did that fight. And that was sort of where I ended. I also realized when I ended that I didn't go to the Mountain Pass. So the next time I play, I'm going to go do the Mountain Pass stuff, because I just went through the Underdark. And since my character is very, very horny for Lae'zel, I need to go do the Mountain Pass stuff, because that's where her whole story thing is. You have an idea for an alternate story about a universe where Rome falls sooner and that makes them more advanced. A lot of alternate histories do the opposite, but I think massive empires lead to stagnation. It's not a bad call. So the thing is, in some ways, massive empires lead to stagnation. In some ways, massive empires do lead to innovation. I would say, if I were to make a claim about, like, what is sort of the thing that inspires historically, like, innovation, it's not so much whether or not an empire is big. In fact, big empires can be one of the biggest drivers of innovation. It's more mixing and tolerance. The periods of the biggest innovation and like great scientific advancements and, like, you know, like cultural production and such are periods where there was a place, like one concentrated place, like a city or something like that, where lots of people from various different places, different backgrounds, different identities were together, and there was also a lot of money floating around. So, like, places that are rich and have people from various different backgrounds existing in one place and being on like being not actively discriminated against and like all that kind of thing, and being able to like interplay and mix their ideas together. That's the places where innovation happens. That's why, like, sort of Baghdad and the House of Wisdom was one of the greatest centers of innovation during one of the largest empires in history, the sort of Islamic Empire at its peak, because the seat of the empire at Baghdad had like Christians, it had Jews, it had Hindus, it had Chinese, like, you know, diplomats, and they all were there, and they were, you know, there was no like sort of active religious discrimination. So like people of various different backgrounds were able to exist within the empire, and they were able to do so, like intergroup interaction in a very big way. So like the Islamic Empire led to this huge boom in science and philosophy and such, because you had like Hindus and Chinese traders and Christians and Jews and Muslims all sort of working in the same place with similar, like the same language, and with the funding of the Caliph that gave them sort of the energy to do those things. You see another one like this actually in you see a lot of it in like Spain too, like in Muslim Spain, when a lot of those cities had like powerful Muslim, Jewish, and Christian communities that interacted a lot, and there was a lot of progress. You can see that in like Italy during the sort of early modern period, where they became a trade hub, and the trade hub meant that Mediterranean traders from the Middle East were coming in and trading things from all over the world with the people who live there, and that led to a lot of like, you know, different things and ideas. But yeah. What class am I playing? I'm playing a monk. Also, you can still go back for the creche. Yeah, I'm gonna go back and get the creche, because my monk is horny for that Lae'zel. They've slept together twice. She is okay with him. He is obsessed with her. So I need to like go and get her creche and do her storyline stuff. Keep rejecting your company to Lae'zel, at least until that last light in fight. Interesting. Is there a reason for that? Does she like? Does she like? After that big ass fight with the other Githyanki, does she like her tune change a little bit? I noticed that she's a little nicer to me now after the fight. But I don't know. Don't want to spoil it. Okay. On that point, I was going to have an analog of Islam show up in the late 300s, so you get all that 2 centuries or sooner. Honestly, you can, depending upon when your sort of like fantasy version of Rome collapses, that Islam analog could be Christianity. Because if Christianity didn't get like adopted by the Roman Empire and like sort of adopted the trappings of the Roman Empire, Christianity was sort of like this underclass led like movement of people who had sort of like intellectual philosophical stuff that was really big in like the Middle East and North Africa. And without the sort of Romanization of Christianity, it probably would be something fairly similar. So don't want to spoil it for look for her in that map part. Sure. Yeah, I'm looking forward to playing some more of it. I'm gonna do multiple playthroughs because I want to focus. Like, I don't really want to be like constantly swapping out my players and my party. So I'm kind of just focusing on the stories of the 3 main companions that I'm with, which is Gale, Lae'zel, and Shadowheart. So for my next playthrough, I'm probably going to play as one of the characters, and choose 3 other people who did not get the same attention, so I can kind of play with their stories more, and then kind of do that. But yeah, go for it. But yeah, Baldur's Gate's fun. I'm enjoying when I get to play it, but unfortunately, I don't really have a life that lets me do things. Like tonight I'm playing with. I got a meta quest for Christmas for my parents, which is interesting because like we're in this weird sort of financial situation where because my wife got laid off, we're like, we're like we went to the grocery store and bought like a bunch of like lentils and rice and beans and stuff like that so that we could like, in the new year, if we have to like choose between paying rent and eating food, we'll have like a bunch of like, shelf stable food in the basement so that we don't have to make that choice. And then also I just got this new like expensive fucking VR toy from my parents, and it's like a weird sort of juxtaposition of things. But at least it'll be like a new thing to play with to entertain me through. Children do that to free time. Yeah, I basically have on an average day about maybe 2.5 hours of free time a day, total. That is the majority of like the that's the free time I get in a day. I spend about an hour doing creative work. Like I have a bunch of projects I want to do that aren't work, but are like sort of, fun work. I know that sounds silly, but it's like let me just like load up my like little project thing so I can kind of explain it. Like my fun work, my next couple projects are like stuff like D&D or like RPG prep, and stuff like game design. Like I have this idea for a there's that board game that I want to make, and that's on my list of like eventually when I get a couple scraps of like when please sir, I would like a cup of free time, I will like use it to develop this game, that kind of thing. I also just have the hard, what I call the hard drive nonsense, which is I got another gift for my birthday, so it's been a few weeks, and I got a new hard drive. Actually, I got 2 new hard drives. So this part I'm actually going to have to figure out, and I'm actually not looking forward to it. But I got 2 fancy new hard drives from a very close family member for my birthday. And I have a whole idea of how I'm going to like structure my desktop's data system, basically, that's going to be completely different from the way I do it now. It'll make it way better for editing videos and playing video games and that kind of stuff. But I need to do the following. 1, I need to install those new hard drives. 2, I need to transfer my Windows installation to a different drive, and I don't know how to do that. 3, I then need to like move around a fuckload of files so that everything is in the place I want it to be. And I don't even know. I have to like figure out how to do all those things and also not break my computer in the process. That's my idea anyway. What should we talk about? We got about half an hour. Talk about half an hour worth of new things. Because there's no new Star Trek, so we can't really talk about Star Trek very much. There's not going to be any new Star Trek, I think, until like next year, early next year. I think Discovery Season 5 is the next thing that's going to come out, and I think that comes out in like, I think it's coming out in January. I'm not sure, but I think part of my brain says that. When is Discovery Season 5 coming out? April. Okay, so it's coming out in April. And I imagine that the writer's strike really set back that Starfleet Academy show, so I don't imagine that's coming out anytime soon. I imagine that, I think, it seems like maybe starting at the beginning of next year is when we're hitting like the sort of dry spell that the writer's strike caused. And there's going to be a lot of time where we're like not watching a lot of new shows because nothing's really coming out. The new season of For All Mankind's out right now, though, and I'm enjoying that quite a bit. Who's liking For All Mankind? There's good alternate history. But I've already said that before. I will say this season, I both love and hate that it is... it's doing a lot more stuff focused on the Soviets this year, which I like and hate, because it is definitely like, okay, we're doing more stuff with the Soviet Union. I'm down. I'm cool with that. I think that's awesome. But I don't love that it's definitely, you can definitely tell that it's trying to say something about the invasion of Ukraine. And so it's leaning into sort of Russophobia and making the Soviet Union just a country made up of bad people who are bad because they're bad. And that the Soviet government only ever does bad things because they're bad, and they're the bad guys. And I don't know if you realize this, but the Soviet Union is bad people who are bad because they're bad. And they don't seem to be able to escape that at all. They don't seem to really care too much about like what communism is, what communism means, why. Like again, it's because I think that Ron Moore, who made the show, is a liberal. And liberals don't care about the why on any question, it seems. So they don't know why the Soviets are authoritarian. They don't know why they do the things they do, and that kind of thing is. That's about all. But like, I mean, the show is one of the better shows currently active on TV right now, and this new season it's testing my patience for like the way that it portrays communism. But honestly, like its world building is so good. Its character stuff, like it to have a show that takes place over like I think like an almost like 50-year period at this point, with multiple generations, with unfolding character storylines that happen over literal decades, and to still have that have a strong plot and characters that you really believe in, and genuine. And one of the things that I really love about For All Mankind is that they have these moments where they can create immense tension. And because the show has moments where the people, the characters both succeed and fail in spectacular and dramatic ways, when those moments of tension really start to ratchet up on For All Mankind, you genuinely get really, really at the edge of your seat because you don't know how it's going to turn out. You genuinely don't. You're like, I don't know if they're just going to kill this character right now. And then the thought sometimes, but then that means is that like when you're at the edge of your seat, when things go badly, it's like, oh shit. But then when things are like good, you're like, oh, like you feel so good. Like you want, like I've had, For All Mankind is the first show in a very long time. I feel like maybe the first show in my life where there were moments where I like legitimately wanted to cheer when like something happened on the show. Like the fact that it can manipulate my emotions that way is so good. That is signed that like some really, really good writing. That's the way that I would say about that. It's a bummer we're not getting that Section 31 show. I'm okay with not getting the Section 31 show. I did not need the sort of Section 31 in Star Trek was great when it was sort of the space CIA and they were just sort of evil, shadowy people, and that was good. Every step since then has been this sort of attempt to rehabilitate Section 31 and try to not make them out as just like basically the bad guys of the story, and trying to make them more morally gray and make it like there was so much of like Ash making excuses for Section 31 in season 2 of Discovery that read word for word like things that liberals say to defend the CIA in the real world. It has been downgraded to a movie, which because Michelle Yeoh just all of a sudden got really expensive, so they couldn't afford to do a whole show. And I think I can tolerate a movie, especially like it's probably going to have bad messaging, but I really like Michelle Yeoh. Michelle Yeoh is great. And I can't wait to see... And Michelle Yeoh's character in, like, Philippa Georgiou, Empress Philippa Georgiou, is a very fun character. So I think that I'm going to enjoy the movie, but it's going to be one of the most problematic Star Trek things I've ever seen. That's going to be my takeaway from it, but obviously we'll see what happens when it comes out, right? What's duck sauce? Or just DS9? DS9 Bar Association got me to cheer. Interesting. As the show goes on, For All Mankind, just about everyone makes terrible decisions all the time. Okay, I agree, although I would say that when you say everyone makes terrible decisions, you almost exclusively mean Ed Baldwin. If there is one like sort of down point of the show, is that it is so based around Ed Baldwin, and Ed Baldwin is like the least likable person on that show. And he often makes extremely stupid decisions. But like, there are other decisions that, you know, would logically be stupid that you can kind of explain with like the sort of like the emotional context. Like there's the whole thing with like Margot and like her sort of, you know, giving shit to the Soviets because but like, if you understand that she was like, you know, she was falling for this like other Soviet scientist and they were kind of holding that over her, like you can like, even if like, you know, it's not logical, you can kind of get it. Like if they make bad decisions, the show does the work of like justifying, like explaining why they made the bad decisions. With the exception of Ed Baldwin, where Ed Baldwin just seems to make bad decisions because he's a dumbass, basically. It seems, anyway. Maybe that's the whole thing about Ed Baldwin, is that he makes bad decisions because he is a person who was chosen for the job because he was a test pilot. And then as he just became like an actual historical figure, he keeps getting deferred to for leadership when he actually doesn't have good skills for that kind of thing. And it always leads to his detriment. But yeah, like, but the show, like when bad decisions happen, like it's not like The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead was a show where they would always get to a situation, because the whole situation with zombies in general is that zombies are actually like, if you were to really look at it logically, a zombie apocalypse would be a very easy one to deal with and then recover from. So every time the people in The Walking Dead get to a stable situation, they have to create a scenario where someone takes stupid pills and basically undoes it all. And that was really annoying. But people in For All Mankind not making like the best decisions, usually like when they do that, they focus on explaining, at least, even if it's not a great reason, they at least do the work to give them a plausible motivation for why they did it. And a lot of other shows don't do that. The Last of Us. Last of Us is a great show. Yeah. I love The Last of Us HBO show was solid. No notes. Great show. Especially because it was an adaptation of a video game that wanted to be a show. Like, let's be honest. I've only ever played I've only like played a little bit of The Last of Us, and then I watched a decent chunk of like a sort of, you know, what are those things called? Like a let's play, no commentary playthrough of The Last of Us, which I am still blown away that that's legal. Like that's a thing that you're allowed to do on YouTube. But I watched like maybe like half of one of those, and it's very much a game that like Naughty Dog just wanted to make a TV show, but they had to staple a game onto it, because it seems like the game aspect of The Last of Us isn't very good, or it's not extremely interesting. But the story of The Last of Us is really good. So when you got rid of the sort of semi-game aspect of it and just made it into a show, you're like, oh, this rules. I love it. The show, no notes. Well, the only note I have is that because it is an adaptation of a game, there are some aspects where there's like stuff that like you wouldn't do for a show, but you would do for a game. And there are some scenes where I can like see the cutscene in my head and exactly show the sort of like gameplay scenario they were trying to make on that show. Like the things that come to mind is like how the zombies all have these, like the zombies in The Last of Us have these like different types. Like there's these different subtypes of cordyceps zombie, and you can tell why they did it, because if you're playing a shooter, you need to have different sort of subtypes of monsters so that the gameplay is more interesting, and also that they're like very they're visually distinct, because when you're playing a video game, you need to have that sort of visual distinction to you know, do a shooter, because in a shooter game, silhouettes are super important and that kind of thing. And so I'm always just like, I like that. I thought that was like, there's something very video gamey about it that they really couldn't write around, but it was a thing that existed and I got that. The other one too is there's this scene in The Last of Us where I was very much like, I can see the cutscene in my head and I can see exactly what kind of constraint they're trying to put on you. And it's the scene where they're escaping, spoiler alerts, I guess, where they're escaping from Kansas City, I want to say it was, and they're basically they're being harried by a guy who's in a sniper tower, like they're being shot at, and Joel has to go around the back while like under fire from a sniper rifle to go up and take out the sniper. And then when he like does take out the sniper, there's like this confluence where like the bad guys who are chasing after them are chasing after them, but also a whole bunch of zombies get out. And and Joel is like, he's got the sniper rifle and he's trying to clear a path for Ellie and that other guy to get out. And like, I can see that exact scene in the video game in my head where they're like, let's add a scene where you do like a sort of sniper cover thing. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah. But yeah, HBO's The Last of Us was a really good show, and I forgot that came out this year. And also, yeah, just hearing Tara from True Blood being like, "Yeah, we're communists. What the hell are you talking about?" Beautiful, love it. Also, I can't remember what her name is. She was also in Game of Thrones, but she played Ellie in The Last of Us show, and she was so good. I mean, yeah, like, because, you know, everyone loves Pedro Pascal, because Pedro Pascal is a national treasure. But Bella Ramsey is her name, and Bella Ramsey was really good. She was really good in Game of Thrones too. One of like the sort of one of the small bits of light in the last season of Game of Thrones was when Bella Ramsey, who I think was maybe like 11 or 12 at the time when she played that role, where she plays like this like minor noble who like goes to war as like an 11 or 12-year-old girl and like fights a giant or something. Yeah, it was one of the few good moments in the last season of Game of Thrones that I really liked. Is this? I'm trying to remember. Is Stupid Pills like that lady in that one game who opens a door full of zombies to get her dog? Yeah. The one I always think of is on The Walking Dead. I can think of several incidents in which Stupid Pills featured heavily. One is where there's an arc in, I think, season 2 where they find a prison. And they manage, and like a prison would be like a perfect place to hold up during a zombie apocalypse. You've got lots of space to live, and you have like, you know, fences all around. And zombies, because they're people, they can't like, you know, hop over fences or whatever. So you've got this perfect situation. There's typically like a large outdoor area you could turn into a farm. Great, right out the apocalypse. But then I can't remember what they did, but they had to add a thing where Stupid Pills happened so that the zombies could get through the fence and ruin everything. And that sort of changed it. The other one was when they got to Alexandria, outside of they got to like this town that had walled off, and like everything was working out so well, and they had like a government structure, but what's his name? Freaking Andrew Lincoln. I can't remember what his character's name is anymore. He's like, they don't understand. they're not ready for when things go bad. And like all of the badness that happens is because he actively sabotages their leadership, and eventually everything falls apart. Which sucks because like the Walking Dead comic book is so not like that. The Walking Dead comic book is amazing, and it's made by the same guy who made Invincible, and it's really good. Is on all mankind, I mean. What do you mean? What, I missed the context of what you were saying there. If your zombie media is about the zombies, you're doing it wrong, yeah. The comics are just as bad. I mean, maybe it gets bad further on, but the first two... I read the first two trade paperbacks, and I thought they were decent. People aren't as like outwardly like hostile right-wing dickwads in The Walking Dead's first two arcs anyway. But I also haven't read them in a long time. Maybe I'm wrong. I definitely liked a lot of things a long time ago that I realized were stupid in retrospect. It gets worse as it goes. That makes sense. My guess is that like something like the Walking Dead has a limited set of things that you can do with that premise. But if the series kept being popular, it would be harder and harder to find new things to sort of happen. And then sort of things fall apart. I feel like it makes me think of how one of the best zombie stories that had a movie made out of it is one of the least explored settings, and yet it's like one of the best thought out, and that is the Max Brooks zombie, like the World War Z setting. Did Max Brooks ever make a sequel to World War Z? World War Z is like one of my favorite books. Shit was that movie was because I don't know if you haven't read it. World War Z is a novel that is written as it's written about like sort of the zombie apocalypse and how the world got so bad and how things came back from the brink. But it's written as if it's somebody writing a fictional like oral history of the war. So instead of it being like sort of like a novel in the sense that you would think about it, it's written like it's a bunch of people kind of giving their like as if somebody did a bunch of interviews with a bunch of people who lived through it, and they're sort of giving their take on their experience and what happened. And I thought that was so much more interesting than what than like any other zombie like fiction that I've ever gotten into. So is that. Oh boy. So I did not know this, and this is interesting. It seems that after World War Z, Max Brooks wrote a short story collection about his zombie setting, and then wrote a bunch of Minecraft novels. What happened to you, Max? Things can't be going great if you're writing Minecraft tie-in novels. Those can't be good. God, the author of World War Z tells the story of a hero stranded in the world of Minecraft who must unravel the secrets of a mysterious island in order to survive. God, that's sad. Minecraft is a zombie game, technically. There is that, yeah. God. Are people actually reading Minecraft novels? I mean, obviously they are because it was a New York Times bestseller. How is that a thing? Someone make it make sense to me. How is that how are Minecraft novels a thing that people want? Maybe I'm just like too hard on what's it called? Too hard on on tie-in. I've always thought that like tie-in novels were bad, and so I never really like gave them too much attention. But people are telling me that they're actually not bad. So oh man. Villagers screwed over any chance of Minecraft having good lore, especially with all the anti-Semitism they were created with. You know, it makes a lot more sense given that that Notch is a weird fucking neo-Nazi or something. So the villagers, I guess, make a lot more sense. I don't even know what Notch is doing these days, nor do I really need to know. It sucks that he's an asshole because I kind of wanted that. I was kind of into that game that he was working on that never really went anywhere about where part of it is like programming a computer to run your spaceship, like automating your spaceship and stuff. I don't know. It's just, yeah, okay. Factorio took the reins in that. Too bad the owner of it is also a right-wing dookie head. Is that true? Shit. Because I kind of want to check out... I have Factorio. I played it like once, and I didn't like... One of the key aspects of the game I didn't like, which was the monsters. And I was trying to see if I could play it. If next time I was going to try and play it with the monsters turned off and just do the sort of factory game. And I don't know if that subtracts the fun or not. But the monsters were the part that annoyed me the most about that game. I liked the sort of building the systems, but I didn't so much like the sort of combat part. Play Rail World if you get back into it. Optimal way of playing Rail World? Is that a different game, or is that like a mod for Factorio? It's a world type. It's the best way to play XY, limited XY world size. So what makes Rail World different from like a regular world in Factorio? You're forced to use roads to expand outward because you're limited in 2D space. Like you can't like you don't build cars or something? I don't know. I need to mess around with it at some point. Man. So many things made by shitty people. That makes me unhappy. Because also, yeah, like, I know one of my other favorite games is also made by an absolute shithead, which is RimWorld. Fucking love RimWorld. Tynan Sylvester is kind of a dickhead, which is sad. They did an Equalizer remake with a black female lead and by Troy Boomer. Dad actually likes it. My Tory boomer. I don't even know what Equalizer is. What is... Anyways, we are getting close to the end of the time, so we need, like, you know... We are quickly coming to the end of our session today. Next, you're going to tell me that, like, the Slay the Spire group are assholes, which would make me sad, because I like that game. Have you heard of Satisfactory? Is the Dwarf Fortress guy still okay? Yeah, there is that. I do like Dwarf Fortress. Satisfactory. I don't think I think is Satisfactory the one made by Zachtronics? No, it's not. Okay. Oh. Plenty of things to imagine myself playing when I actually have time to do so. Anyways, everybody, it's been a real gas. I have to do, I guess, like an hour of work before I have to go do other things. But you guys have been great. Always a fun Friday thing. So I think that next Friday, the 22nd, is going to be my last stream of the year. So maybe we'll do some end of year things. But yeah, take care of yourself. Take care of each other.